I'm a newcomer in various capacities, and it's a lot of capacities from teaching to where I professionally I hold many hats. I engage in many public engagements, conducting seminars, workshops with people from all walks of life, students, and so on. And from that experience, what I've seen is that there is certainly an evolution in our governance structure as a country, as a people, and as a government in terms of philosophy and in terms of behavior. Now, let me explain what I mean. It is true that historically, we've been a polarized society. We've had many eras characterized as when we have political instability, attempts to destabilize a government through all various means. In recent times, and in recent times I'm referring to 2020, compared to in the early 90s and way back in the 80s, we have seen attempts, and those old, what has occurred in our history politically, it's dying away. The attempts for riots, politically motivated riots, violence, crime, that is dying out. And that is a good thing. And that is in terms of the behavior of people, rather. Then we have seen post-elections 2020, we've seen the results of the local government election. The result of the local government election demonstrates that this polarization, the gap, the culture, the view of people, the perspective of people is changing, whereby people from all ethnic group, religion, whatever the background, are embracing a government not based on the ideology of race, but on the principle of whether they believe the government is delivering on its promise, on whether the government, governing the country, developing the country in which they could see a future. So that is a second perspective. A third experiential perspective that I wish to share is that, and I think this needs to be said, is that a lot of young youth, and particularly Black youth, that I have personally engaged with, have strong love, strong support, strong acceptance for the government of the day. And this is rather something that is very pleasantly surprised for me. It is something pleasant for me, given the history we came from, and from my experience, from my position, our history is what I read about and what I study. The present, now in my experience, that is what I can speak of, and this is what I'm experiencing. Students at the University of Guyana, students, many other institutions, young youths from all across different forms have this acceptance for the government. So, of governance and whether there is an evolution of the governance model of the country, as a people, and as a government, we are seeing some changes. Then come back to the local government elections. Not only the people, but a lot of opposition-aligned members have crossed over to the government. And I know for a fact, we've heard the vice president said this and the president said this publicly, that there are many opposition members of parliament who could call the president, who could call the vice president or ministers, and they get things sorted. And that is true because as you know, I sit on a constitution, and the formula, the composition of the Public Procurement Commission is 5 commissioners, 3 of which are nominated by the government and 2 of which are nominated by the opposition. And then they have to be approved by a 2/3 majority in the parliament, the National Assembly, then appointed by the president. And I can tell you from that perspective where I sit as a commissioner on the PPC, we work very well together with the opposition. In fact, we get a lot of cooperation from the opposition nominees. And that is because we carry out our functions impartially and professionally. We haven't had any problems. So here I sit on a body where I can attest to the fact that opposition and government are working together. The same could be said in the National Assembly. While there are more examples of what Timothy is oftentimes amplified, there are a few examples that I would like to amplify that were successes. For example, the local content legislation. You would recall that the government, the opposition would have brought several recommendations when the local content legislation was being debated in Parliament. And about 10 out of 15 recommendations were adopted and included in the bill. The same for another legislation when it went to the select committee. Opposition and government worked together. They worked impartially in a bipartisan way, and they had an improved product. So I think there is certainly the governance model of the country is evolving. We are certainly getting more cooperation on both sides, albeit not often as we would like, not on every matter as we would like, but I think we're getting there.
Okay, I think that's a good start as well from you. Good commentary. GHK Lalsur, you would like to address the preceding commentators' comments?
Yes, good evening, everyone, again, and thanks for having me here. The question is, do we need, does Guyana need a new government formula, a new governance formula? After 2,000 years, democracy is a bit tired. The question is whether it has exhausted its utility. And everybody talks about democracy, including the North Koreans. When we look at democracy in the United States, I was appalled what happened a couple of years ago. We come to Guyana and we have democracy, we have free and fair elections, despite the fact that even to this day, which I disagree with, they're disputed. They're disputed. I think we need to move on. We should have moved on from day one. With that being said, I have heard the previous commentator said there's a lot of cooperation and behind the scenes and in the parliament, etc. Well, I'll tell you, I happen to be moving about. I'm not in parliament. I'm not nowhere to parliament. And I'll tell you, I've never seen this country so polarized. And I lived here just in the early days of Burnham. It was bad then. It was so bad that people like me had to leave. But I've never seen it this rancorous and acrimonious as I see it now, especially given the refresher we had 3.5 years ago with our elections. So the question was, again, do we need a new formula? I think in a country where you have a 90-10 ratio of election victory, we could get by. 80-20, yes. 70-30, yes. Even 65-35, I'd be prepared to say, yes, that is workable and that should be sustainable. But when we are as thin the phrase that is favored is razor thin. When we are so razor thin that it's an all or none situation that leaves the black man or the Indian man on the outside and the losing side, I think that we need to approach this question whether we need a new formula. The problem is that when we need an expenditure in intellect, an expenditure in insights, an expenditure in imagination and curiosity, we're not prepared to do that. That's shut down immediately. Oh, the PNC want come back in through the back door. The PNC want dig a tunnel and come out from underground. And there's some credibility to that. And the PNC want come through the side door. And this conversation never occurs when the PNC is in office about this new formula and shared governance and all this business. And that's fine. The problem is, where does it leave us? Where does it leave us as a society when close to, not quite, close to half of the electorate feels that I have no say, I have no place, I have no part, especially at this time in our society. Look at something that is happening to us. We are a new country in a new era with a new economy, with a new vision, but we still have the old mentality where with each step that we take forward, we're swiveling our necks and looking backwards at the 1960s and Burnham. And now we've got fresh food. We turn sideways, 2020, 2019, 2020, and we say rigging, and that is correct. Somebody like me is never ever going to deny that. But if we keep looking back at yesterday, how are we going to prepare ourselves to look for tomorrow when half of the people in this country, close to half, 40%, 38, whatever, but enough to say that we ain't got no share in this thing that Guyana here today. And you say under a democracy, 50 plus 1 is going to what it's going to make today. Now, I have gone into some communities. I am not an activist. I have no political ambition. I have no political affiliation. If it's the PNC, I'll bust their asses, excuse my language. If it's the PPP, it's the same thing. If I feel that something is not right. I've gone into some communities and I've talked to some people, and the level of anger, the level of resentment in this country is frightening. My brothers and the audience, locally or overseas, the level of seething resentment in this country is frightening. And I'm concerned about that. That is why I think that the question should not be shut, the issue or the inquiry or the question should not be shut down immediately about, do we need a new formula? I think that we do. I think, like I said, the democracy is exhausted, because if that could happen in America, and we never seem to get it right here. We win, we hear about rigging. We lose, we hear about rigging. How are we going to continue like this? We need to be prepared to commit to an investigation of our political history, which is our racial history, our political passions, which is our racial passion, our political environment, which is our racial environment, and our political presence and our racial presence. And we are not moving off the back burner to get to this. How long are we? Look at what is happening in Niger and in Gabon. Those were democratically elected societies, governments, where people said enough is enough, and they took things over the edge. Now, I hope to God that that never happens here. Let's get that clear. But you never know who's getting ideas here. I wasn't here in 2002, 2003, but I think that 5 men in some orchestrated jailbreak held this country hostage. Whoever was behind that held this country hostage for a number of years. Now, if 5 men can do that, what about 50? What about 500? And that is the fragility of our democracy, of our state of governance at this time, which I think needs a fresh, honest, sincere, a genuine look, and which we are not prepared to do. We won, it's over. The other side say you rigged, and it ain't over yet. And so we are locked, we are deadlocked there. And that is why I say, I quite frankly don't know the answer what this formula looks like. But it's got to be something that other people have tried. It's got to be something that is unique to us, where every one of us are sitting around the table, looking at each other in the eye, and having that kind of conversation that draws us closer to something that may work. We always say that, oh, it never worked no way. And we say, because it never worked no way, we're done with it. Let us give it a try. Let us give everyone a place at the table. This is not no back door or side door or tunnel. Give everyone a place at the table so we can feel that we own our destiny. We can feel that we are not outsiders. We can feel that we are Guyanese, especially at this particular time in our history. That's it for me.
If I may, the president, the vice president, the prime minister, members of the cabinet have said, how can we give others a place at the table when they themselves are not recognizing who we are? They're not recognizing us as the government. They're not recognizing the outcome of the election. They're using the term installed governments and so on. So I think one needs to start at that level to address that problem before we could even begin to talk about a space at the table. And Joel, you know, discussed the evolution of the government. We started out as a democracy in the 60s when the British handed us power. We descended into a dictatorship. Democracy was restored in 1992. There was an attempt again at authoritarianism 2019, 2020, and we are back now supposedly into a democracy. Where did we, let's ask the lawyer, Timothy Jonas, senior counsel.
I was taken aback with what I just heard. First of all, JHK, I agree with what you said. There's something that I gotta say. We have to recognize the truth and we have to speak the truth. And that's the starting point. And if we're not doing that, if we're prepared to lie or to fudge the truth or to paint a glossy picture or look at things through rose-tinted glasses, then you don't recognize the problem and you can never reach the solution. So let's talk about one Guyana. Under Granger, the government pretended that they were government for all the people. There were not very many Indo-Guyanese that were convinced by that charade. At present, the government of the day pretends that there's one Guyana and they're government for all the people. There are not many Afro-Guyanese who are convinced by that charade. And the anger that GHK Lal is talking about is true. It exists. It's in the villages. It's a seething resentment at the perception and the reality of being excluded. And we saw it with the Henry brothers' response. We saw it with the march from coming down to the Success Market. We saw it over in Essequibo. All this needs is a spark because there is a seething resentment underneath. And I don't want to hear, Guyanese are not foolish. Guyanese are not stupid. I don't want to hear any feel-good nonsense about, oh, I know black youths and they've warmed up to the PPP. That's rubbish. That's ridiculous. So let's speak the truth. Don't let's say that at the local government election, they had some kind of warm, cuddly feeling among previous APNU supporters for the government. Let's talk the truth. There were some APNU leaders who were handpicked, selected, and offered things, and who turned their coat. And when they turned their coat, they took 0 votes with them. That's the truth. And if you don't believe me, look at Tocqueville and see how many votes the PPP got in LGE in Tocqueville. So we need to understand that in a democracy, we have leadership by the worst among us. And that is represented and it is manifested by the fact that people who tried to rig an election, when they lost that, they were quite happy to go to the other side and start smiling and show a friendly face. And it was also manifested by the fact that the people who they were trying to rig against are now hugging them up and pretending that they're all friends. There is a lack of morality, a lack of honesty in our leadership. And it was manifested in the local government elections where promises were made and a few people were brought over to turn their coats and brought 0 votes with them, because they brought the 0 votes because the electorate are seething. They are angry. They are put out. They are outcast. And they are seeing a government who, as Lal says, a government that is saying, I'm not even talking to those people on the other side because they don't recognize us. But you know something, this concept, this expression, installed government, it didn't start in 2020. The expression installed government also was bandied about in 2015. And 2015 was also a fair election. So as Lal says, each side in turn, when they lose, will scream and shout, rigged elections, rightly or wrongly. But at the end of the day, it is also true that both sides like the absolute power, and we are not having any situation in Guyana where everybody says, oh, it's one government and this is a government for all the people. Let's stop with that. That has never been the case. It is hogwash. Don't even let's pretend that that's happening, because if you pretend that's happening, you're not going to solve our problem. To solve a problem, you have to recognize the problem, identify the problem, and then start talking about solutions.
Okay, so you seem to have identified and recognized the problem. And before we go to the solution, let's see if Joel Bagwandin agrees, wants to rebut, and then we'll talk about some solution.
Well, I am not going to dispute what was said as truth, as like my friend Timothy, rubbish is what I said. It is garbage. What I said is also a truth. It's a fact. It is a fact that thousands of Guyanese of all walks of life are benefiting from scholarships. It is a fact, including Afro-Guyanese, Indo-Guyanese, indigenous people. It is true that thousands of Guyanese are benefiting from access to housing, access to land, access to resources, access to everything. The hospital that the government is investing in is for everybody. We could debate all night, but I'm not going to dispute or say what GHK said about resentment in some villages, that it is garbage. We got to be real as well, as you were asking to be real. And in addition to that, we're taking all this problem of resentment and lump or use it as the basis to say, well, we have a problem with the governance model. Well, for me, it doesn't matter what governance model you have. That is not necessarily going to solve the problem. How do you know that that is going to solve the problem? And you know why I say that? I say that because you know why the PPP government and President Ali is out in the field and they connect with the people and they bypass the RDC and they go to these agencies and they're criticized for it. You know why he does that? And GHK admits that he's not in the workings of government. Well, in the various capacities that I work professionally, private sector, I'm in consultation and so many other places, I can tell you for a fact. The reason why Granger failed is because he didn't have control of his government. He didn't have control of his ministers. And he was not very competent in how a public service is run. Take housing, for example. The same housing ministry with the same resources, the same human resources, the same technical resources and physical resources. What the previous government delivered in 5 years, they barely delivered 7,000 house lots, and not even turnkey in the housing program that the incumbent government has. The same ministry that this government was able to deliver 3 times that amount and they have a target of 50,000 by 2025, and they're going to exceed that target. You know why? Because the reality is such that the government means well, and I think Granger had good intentions too. But the problem, one of the reasons why the president is doing what he's doing is because the system, the people in the system undermine the government, regardless of which government in power. The people in the agencies, in the ministries, undermine executive instructions. They don't carry it out. And I know of many instances, the president gave instructions, somebody didn't carry it out deliberately. This is the reality. You tell me which governance model can fix that. That is also a truth. Is it garbage? How do we fix that? Then we use this, as GHK Lal alluded to, backdoor governance. You know what I said in a forum the other day when this whole thing of shared governance come up? And I credit GHK for being honest about the discussion, the conversation. Shared, they still talk about it when they're out of power, but they talk about it when they're in power, but they talk of it when they're out of power. How could we have shared governance? Forget about shake hand and all them nonsense. How could we have shared governance? It doesn't matter what constitutional reform we have, but how could we have shared governance when we don't have a shared principle? We don't have shared values. We don't have a shared philosophy. We don't have mutual respect. We don't have trust. How could you have shared governance? No constitutional reform could solve that. It is the behavior of people. So I'm not gonna sit here and say what Timothy is saying is trash. Part of the problem of why there is resentment is because, and again, the reason the government has to defend its track record is because when you have oil resources, the challenge, and this is one of the weaknesses of the PPP government, and it cost them to lose the elections in 2015 because they are very bad at managing at public relations and defending their track record in the pre-2015 era. Now they've improved in that regard. Managing expectations of the people is what is important and what contributes partially to that resentment. Because when it is not GHK and Timothy alone that's going to corner shop and go in countryside, I just travel to, I may live in a cocoon. I just be in the ground too and I interact with people from all walks of life. And when you listen to people, the truth is that expectation, you have a man like Glenn Lal telling people that we could get $1 million every month. But when you do the maths, multiply $1 million a month by 300,000 households by 12 months. The answer that you get, we don't have that amount of money that we get in from oil. So when you have people like Glenn Lal and respectfully GHK Lal as part of that team, and they have this freedom of speech, this free medium, the government is battling to manage expectations, and that is why I do what I do. And that is part of the problem for the resentment. But I'm not discounting the fact that yes, more needs to be done, but we got to be practical and realistic as well. And yes, the government has to work with those people as well. So that is my take on that.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Mr. Chairman, if I could share 3 thoughts, please, 3 quick thoughts. First of all, I'll go backwards. I'm glad you brought up, sir, the fact about freedom of expression and freedom of speech. I don't know if you folks realize this, but I've come under some vicious fire for just speaking the truth. And I'm appalled at the deplorable levels and depths at which this government, this democratic government, would go to smear and vilify and demonize a citizen. This is the freedom of speech we have here. When I'd like my brother to tell me who owns Live in Guyana, it's not the PNC. All right. So that's my freedom of speech. That's me personally. I know about that. That's one. Secondly, I'm just saying, sir, and I think we all heard it, including the audience, we have no shared values. We have no shared principles. We have no shared philosophy. And excuse me if I go overboard, and we have no shared visions. Then what the hell do we have? Why are we together? How long is this going to hold? If we have nothing that holds us together, values, principles, visions, my God, we just threw the whole kitchen sink out there. And the third thing I want to say, which has nothing to do with what anybody said here, is that I remember in the 2020 elections, and you folks were very intricately and intimately involved in that. I remember people saying, oh, we got the swing vote, and we got the youth vote, and we got the educated vote, and we got the difference maker vote. And guess what the hell happened? Everybody voted like their grandmother and their grandfather voted. Call the man down the line, excuse me, the black man down the line. And this is where we are. This is why I'm saying, excuse me for those raw, pungent terms that may offend somebody, people. I am sorry. But the fact of the matter is that is why our elections are so razor thin. That is why the resentments and the anger build, not in some villages, but across this country. And people, we got the internet. I am one of the dinosaurs that is not on Facebook or Twitter. I don't even know what those things mean. And where I am kind of outside the loop. I am one of the people who is an outsider, so I don't harbor the ancient grudges and prejudices in this country. The PNC do wrong, I tell you, this is what it is. The PPP do, I said, this is what it is. And you know what? The worst thing you can be in this country is in the middle, because both sides of the pencil catch you and lock you off and bust your ass, right? So this is the story here. So let me go back to where we are. Gentlemen, it is my pleasure to participate in this program, and I would love to see that we sit down, and I said, investigate. Remember what I said, the expenditure of intellect, of insight, and of imagination. And we must investigate our political history and our racial history and our past and our present, and see how we can synthesize, all these contradictions, all these differences, these unshared, non-shared, and get to someplace that can glue us together as a polity.
Okay, so I think Timothy, so I think GHK Lal solution.
If I may, Vishnu.
Yeah.
First of all, I'd like to withdraw the comment I made at the opening that GHK is a politician. He just demonstrated by his absolute honesty that he is not. I'd also like to congratulate Joel, who came much closer to the truth in his second round than his first round. After the nice platitudes about knowing black youth who are warm to the PPP, my boy Joel then acknowledged the seething resentment, and he then changed the subject and gave a speech about what a good job the PPP is doing. He talked about scholarships and housing and the outreach and all kind of thing. And then he made this comment that GHK landed on. First of all, freedom of speech. And GHK's answer was perfect, because there is an army of people, journalists, PR folk, Facebook warriors who are employed by the PPP, who go to work at Homestretch and various places, and whose only job is to silence the independent voices by personal attacks, by digging up dirt, by doing anything they can. So freedom of speech is one nice thing to talk about, but the fact is that people are terrified in Guyana to speak. The people who are bidding for contracts can't speak, because if they criticize, they're told they don't get contracts. The people who just want to express an outrage can't speak, because they are landed on. There's a Molly Mel who was very vocal, who turned off her Facebook page, thousands of followers. GHK Lal has been under serious pressure. As he says, if you're in the middle in Guyana, if you're not siding with either side, you have no friends. And I can speak of personal experience in that regard. So don't let's pretend about freedom of speech. But I think what's most important is this interesting statement, which I disagree with, that these people who I am trying to sell, whose I obviously am on their side, do not share the same principles and the same policies and the same morality as those other people who I'm opposed to, who I don't look like me and I feel are bad for Guyana. But let me express my disagreement with that. Because let me say right away that democracy in Guyana has demonstrated its leadership by the worst among us. And where one side pretended to be for all of Guyana, the other side now pretends to be for all of Guyana. Where one side talked about friends and family, the other side is now talking about friends and family. Where one side tried to rig an election, let us not forget the seat that was stolen from the AFC back in 2011. Let us not forget the effort that was made to prevent the opposition having the majority in parliament. And when we talk about shared, about involving the other side in decision making, we know from experience that if you got 33 seats in parliament, you have all the decision making power. The PPP enjoying it now, APNU enjoyed it before 2020. That same system exists on the same procurement board that my friend Joel is on. It exists on the same board that the judicial appointments is on, that the EPA is on, that the energy agency is on, so that the opposition have zero say. In all of these fora, the minister appoints, if not all, the majority. And therefore there is total exclusion. And that is why there is seething resentment. Now GHK made a very useful observation, and I want to recommend it to the listeners, and I want to recommend it to you. We have to use our intellect, we have to use our imagination, we have to be creative, and we have to see what works. Because if we just sit back and accede to what Joel says, that nothing in constitutional reform and no amount of reform and no amount of fixing can repair Guyana, because there's no shared values and no shared policy. If that is your belief, then we have to say that Guyana is a failed state and we should all leave. But we have to think creatively to see what can be done to fix the problem where in 2015, one half of this country was excluded. And in 2020, the other half of this country was and continues now to be excluded. Surely everybody must agree that the government, that the party that wins only 50% of the votes, give or take a few thousand. The last go round, I think it was 10,000. Give or take a few thousand. You only win 50%. Surely that cannot be the government that must have 100% of the control, because 50% will then feel excluded. Can't we use our intellect? Can't we think about a solution to that problem so that the government represents all of Guyana and you have a government for all, not a government for half? Or are we going to continue to pretend that we've done some outreaches and we've taken some pictures with little children that don't look like us, and therefore we're a government for all the people?
So Timothy, it's not that a want of not trying. I mean, we have had constitutional reforms so many times already. It doesn't seem to be working though. If I read you right, I mean, how many constitutional commissions have been established and they didn't get anywhere? And whatever reforms were made also didn't lead to any substantial changes.
Vishnu, you know, if you don't want to do something, you appoint a committee. The only time we've had constitutional reform, except for when Burnham rigged it back in 1980 to get our 1980 constitution, is when violence on the street forced the government of the day to implement constitutional reform. And how the government did it was to appoint a committee. And you had your folk in your committee, my folk in my committee, they met and they made some wishy-washy sad changes, the most significant of which was to limit the presidents to 2 terms, which was promptly challenged by Jagdeo in court unsuccessfully. But except for that, there was no meaningful reform. But I don't think that it is fair to say that we have had constitutional reform, it didn't work, and therefore we give up. Because I don't think the problem is in the Constitution so much as in how we implement our political landscape with only 2 large ethnic-based parties in our demography. Mathematically speaking, if you do that, the government will control parliament because they'll have a majority in parliament, and there will be no transparency. No transparency in any of the transactions, Procurement Commission, GPL, GAIWA, any of the organizations, NISIL, that are controlled by government, and you will have corruption. And that is what we have, corruption. Now, Uju Banton said, thieves don't like see thieves with long bag. So what you do is you put some thieves from the other side to watch some thieves from this side. And between the 2 of them, you have transparency.
But they might cut deal to thief too.
Well, if that happens, and it can happen, then both sides, both Lusignan and Beirut, got to say, well, boy, my people are in there and they're thieving, so we got to find another solution. But the solution cannot be what we've seen for the last 60 years, which is either you with 100% control, and I don't see what you're doing, $80 million signing bonus, or is me in total control, even though I only got 50%, and you can't see what I'm doing, and therefore oil blocks get given away to all and sundry. You see corruption on both sides. There is corruption where there's no transparency, and there's no transparency if one side gets to make all the decisions and gets to appoint all the commissions and put their own personnel where they want them. Both sides must be present, and that's the way to solve it.
Before we hear, all right, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, I'm sorry. Let's face this fact. The PPP ain't going anywhere and the PNC ain't going nowhere. Let's get that straight, right? And I don't think that the voting patterns are going to change anytime soon. Therefore, it is imperative that these 2 behemoths, these 2 leviathans, that we've got to stop talking about install government. I agree with you there. We've got to look past 2020. We've got to, as I said, new country, new vision, new economy. We've got to start from fresh and humble ourselves and be authentic in our approach that, look, what we have is working for half and not the other half, whether it's me or whether it's you. Therefore, we cannot continue like this when we are at this crossroads in our national life. The other thing is that when I talk about formula, I want to hear that this young man and an old man like me and a guy who doesn't look like me or Timothy or you, Dr. Bisram, they all feel that as a Guyanese, I have a vital contribution and a part that is respected and recognized in this country at this time. That is what that formula has to encompass that. And when there people have a feeling of ownership and involvement in their destiny, and that's what we elect political people to do on both sides, as opposed to shooting down, no, backdoor, side door, tunnel. No, sir. We really have to be revolutionary in our thinking. And to use a word that was used earlier, let it evolve. It's going to be a tireless and a thankless task, but we've got to start somewhere. The problem is we're not starting at all. We're not making any step.
I don't know if politicians from either side will accept your recommendation, but let's hear Joel Bagundian.
Timothy started off by saying that he's not a politician, yet he's the general secretary of a political party. So I don't know what you call that.
But he was saying it in jest, but go ahead.
And what I'm getting at is that he did exactly what a politician does by evaluating my commentary to suit his political narrative. And Timothy's political narrative, which I respect, he's big on governance, he's big on constitutional reform. That is the lens he sees everything through, ignoring everything else, ignoring the ramifications of all the other realities that exist. So while he claimed he's not a politician, he demonstrated cleverly in his own way as a very clever politician by attempting to, in his evaluation of my comments. So I'll come back to Timothy. Let me deal with GHK. GHK made some earlier comments that who operates Live Guyana, and he talks about smear campaign. GHK is another. He holds a PhD from me for distortion, misrepresentation, sensationalization, and I describe his writings as poetry. When you read his writing, you read literature, because as he demonstrated himself just now, he talks all sorts of nice things in well-articulated language and words. Where is the example of what you're talking about? Connect what you're saying to reality. And he is postulating that when he says, I would like to see somebody like this young man, meaning me, somebody like Vishnu, somebody like Timothy, somebody like he, an old man like he, and somebody else to constitute this thing that we call governance. Tell me where that does not exist in this country and in the governance framework. Tell me where that, give me examples. When Granger was president, I could give you a list, and I'll tell you this publicly. I was compiling a database of all the ex-military appointment in strategic places. Give me example. Don't tell me Nancy story, poetry, garbage, and philosophy. And that's the problem I have with you. Talk about the smear campaign. Who is Pippin Tom? Who is Pippin Tom? You want to know who's live in Guyana? Who's right Pippin Tom? I don't know. Let's talk about, I don't know what smear campaign the government doing, but you're alluding to an article that I have written, which I have dug up on you, not the government. I, Joel Bagwandin, and it is in the audit report. That is not smear campaign. Anybody could go now on the Guyana Gold Board website and download the audit reports for the Guyana Gold Board for your tenure, which is 2017 to 2019, and look back at your predecessors and your reports. Nothing of the sort. No, you break laws of this country. You have violated the Gold Board Act. You have violated the Procurement Act. You can't account for monies, giving up contracts without the contract. That is documented evidence which could stand up in a court of law. That is not smear campaign. Smear campaign is if I say GHK Lal is a womanizer or he's a sexist. That is smear campaign. I ain't got facts to back that up. I have facts to back up what I said. I quoted from a report. So don't come with this rigmarole nonsense and poetry nonsense here. Right? Speak to your
Mr. Chairman.
Let's hear him.
Mr. Chairman.
Ignore. No. Timothy says that there is an army by the government. What about the army against the government? Starbuck was colluded with GHK to sanitize the letter I wrote. Take out his name completely. No.
Okay, let's hear GHK now. Let's hear, and then we'll
Mr.
come
Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
We gotta talk the facts. These guys come here and they sell a bunch of nonsense. They can't defend anything they write. You write a bunch of garbage and you want to impose that on the people, but then it's all you are part of the problem.
Joel, let's hear it.
People like you are part of the problem.
Okay. Is he finished? Mr. Chairman, is Mr. Bagwandin finished? Is this gentleman finished?
Go ahead.
Tell me with smear campaign.
First of all,
you tell me with smear campaign.
First of all, I regret that a forum to discuss two issues deteriorated to this.
Okay.
very carefully.
No, because you
very
can't
slowly,
deal with
ve-
facts. You talk
very-
about Nancy story, you can't
Joel, let's hear him, please.
facts and figures. Deal with truth and reality. Don't come here to talk story that's right in the papers.
Are you done, sir? Are you done, sir?
Joel, we heard you. Let's hear him now.
Are you
Let's
done,
hear-
sir?
Okay.
First thing, I did not say, point a finger, or say a word that he smeared me. I am saying that there is a group that is sponsored and owned and orchestrated by the PPP government and leadership that is called Live in Guyana that takes its feeds from what it is expected to do. And there was where the smearing, no finger was pointed at him. Now,
That's
how
true.
do we
Yeah,
get
go ahead.
to the, how do we get, so I want to be clear on that.
Yeah, okay.
If we are going to have, each have a sacred right to free speech, which is happening here.
Okay.
But we have an obligation to total honesty and responsibility and an absence of malice and mischievousness. Now, since the goal board was brought in here, I think deliberately, let me say this very, very clear. You should know this as a procurement commissioner, I think, that the Procurement Act of 2003 has section 28 A, B, C, and D that says in a catastrophic event, you can sole source. So I do not know about what law you're talking that was broken when sole sourcing was pursued in conjunction with conversations with the permanent secretary. Secondly, you're talking about money missing. I have no problem with anybody telling me about mismanagement, inefficiency, incompetence. But don't you ever, you or whoever, question my integrity. Be prepared to lose your balls. Be prepared to be separated from it. Now, here's the story.
Where is the building?
We are talking about what I inherited
Joel,
some
let's
stuff.
hear
I
him,
was there
and then we'll
since
come back to you.
2012. I was there that inherited some stuff, but personnel was there. From the 2 weeks after I landed there, the gold board was 62% of the foreign exchange earnings in this country. Go and check the official report. That's not my say so. And there was a stoppage by the Royal Canadian Mint because of the Rasool matter, where no anti-money laundering procedures were in place. And that is why their money was spent to get anti-money laundering people, compliance people, audit people, and the expenditure was justified in terms of the circumstances of the moment. We are talking about a state entity that was 62% of the national economy of foreign exchange earnings, and it came to a dead stop. Now, commitments were made by me in my own name on behalf of the ministry, on behalf of the gold board, on behalf of the government, in association with them. We are going to do A, B, C, D, and we're going to do everything, and you come and investigate that. For you to manipulate, and you, sir, to manipulate information for the purposes of misleading people and attacking me, I find that to be totally obscene. Now, you're talking about breaking, what law was broken there? The contract for access, which you refer to, was a cabinet memo to the minister who passed that on to me and onto the board. The board is 7 men, not one. So every item that used, procurement laws were not broken. No money was missing. Every auditor come in there. This is not a witch hunt. This is a hatchet job that you guys are talking about governance and clean governance, and you cannot begin to know the beginning of it. There's no truth in you, gentlemen, man. Is there no standards that you will not stoop to smear a man because he is speaking out against? I want to see the vice president do good. I want to see the president do good. But you can't come and stuff stupidness down my throat and tell me to go along like some dummy. Go back to what you wrote and you will see, and what I wrote, and I'm not writing to you, I am writing to the man who's behind this, the Honorable Vice President of Guyana, Dr. Bharat, to use the American enunciation, Dr. Bharat Jagdeo. He is the man behind this orchestration. Here's the story. The gold board's matter settled there for 3.5 years, and you guys believe, oh, we got him. We got him. You ain't got nothing. Here, you rush to judgment, and then you sentence me just like that. As I wrote today, and that's the last writing I'm writing on this, it's time to move on. The government has so much. You have the Attorney General, a bright guy. You have the DPP office, very comprehensive. You have SOCO and CID. Go ahead, come after me. You should know, as you talk about the law, that the Guyana Gold Board Act says that acting in good faith, directors are not liable for their actions. Now you tell me something that is 62% of the foreign exchange. First year, 2 weeks into it, it's freezing, stop, dead stop. We got nothing else there. Second year, there's an industrial sabotage where the plant is shut down, and we are running now to scramble to get a roof over our head to start processing gold so we could export this on foreign exchange. Then we are looking for a building and all these other things. And somebody comes, I am terribly, terribly resentful of this, that somebody's going to come and tell me, well, where is the money? Where's the fraud here? Where is the stealing? Where's the thievery? Where's the financial irregularity? A number of people said I should have gone to the courts and sued, but I will not stoop and use Bharat Jagde's weapon to silence people who attack me. I am not that. I will not go there. So every item that you've spoken about, it is there and it is clear. This is not my say-so. You guys know this. And for you to go to that extent, for you to go to this extent, to go into the gutter and to drink from it and to live in it and to own it and then try to drag me in it, nobody's going to do that. And I said to myself, I didn't know you. I never met you, Mr. Jonas, or you, Dr. Bisram. And I said to myself, at least you will keep the conversation there and you're not going to look to ambush me. But listen to me. This is the worst thing you guys can do, and you are not going to be able to prevail because the facts are there and you can twist it and distort it and contort it and do whatever you want. It is there. You have said your piece. I have said my piece in response to that, and I have written 5 pieces at the vice president saying, sir, this ought not to have been. This ought not to have been. This is not about governance.
Okay, so
this is a vendetta, and I'm done with this.
I didn't
If
want
I
this
may,
program to prosecute that issue. So if you can move on from that and try to summarize and conclude our conversation tonight on that one issue we discussed.
I'm really sorry that this came up. I really regret that, and I'm asking myself that I should have come on this program. I feel tainted. Mr. Jonas, with respect to you, Dr. Bisram, with respect to you, I feel tainted.
I'm sorry. Well, listen. Let's do one final round and summarize about the need for good governance, better governance, a new form of governance.
May I speak first, please? May I speak first?
Please.
May I speak first, Dr. Bisram?
Please. Yeah. Go ahead.
I think we are capable of clean governance. I think we are capable of transformational leadership. I think it is not beyond us to have ethical leadership in the ranks of the PPP. I think the president is trying, but he's handcuffed. But I think we cannot pretend to be princes of politics when we are part of the pantheon of perfidy, of perversity and profanity. So therefore, we can get to clean governance, but we've got to work at it. We've got to live it. We can't just talk about it. We just can't twist people's words and say, well, this is what you say, and it's poetry and it's literature. No, this is reality, because I am living with it. And I'm living with it right now in this moment. And this is really, really a sad commentary on the depths to which this country has degraded. But I still think, because of my belief system and because of where I've been in this life, that we can still recover. We can still go to a place that we've never been before. Thank you for listening.
Joel?
I can go last. I said enough. I can go last.
All right. I thought since you're the youngster among us, you may want to go now, but we'll go with the senior counsel. No problem. If it's all right with him. Jonas, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm having some internet issues here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Vishnu. I must say that in a forum where you have disagreements, and inevitably you will have disagreements in Guyana politics because the issues are so, the people are so polarized and the views are so polarized, and the two parties and the loyalists on the two parties are so completely intransigent that there is simply no meeting of minds. The only way for a meaningful discussion that looks to solutions, the only way for that to be possible is at a collegiate level where you speak the truth and you identify the problems and you propose solutions and you listen to the other point of view on those solutions in a way that is respectful, but if not respectful, does not descend to a personal attack. I will say that if I had any issue personally against an individual that touched on his moral character or his ethical background, I would not appear on this forum with that individual, because I don't believe that you can have a meaningful engagement with someone who is bereft of morality or ethics. And that's the starting point. So I am sorry that we heard an attack that was launched personally. I myself am aware of what has been written over time. I'm also aware in 2015 of acts by the Gold Board trying to hedge against the value of gold that was sold abroad, which they don't have the power to do, hedging against people who know much more than them about the stock market and the ebbs and flows of the international value of gold, and losing money. And that happened before 2015. The reason I raise that is that we have a political culture that is mirrored in the PNC and the PNC and the PPP. There are good people on both sides, and I will agree with what GHK Lal says. I think the president has tried and wants to leave a legacy. I think his shortcoming is that he doesn't understand systems, and the systems are more important than individuals, because individuals all have feet of clay and are all susceptible, whereas the system will outlive all of us. And if you make the system airtight and you make the system work, then it will fix itself, and whatever individual goes in there to move the system forward, to work in the system, can be replaced. In a good system, we wouldn't have a Mahdia fire. I hear what Joel is saying. I've always said that the PPP's landmark, their one saving grace that they have done that's a shining beacon, is the housing drive. The PNC's effort comparatively in that area was an abysmal failure. But if you want to point to one area when there are so many failures, and if you don't want to speak the truth about the failures, about Skeldon, about Amalia, about the failure that is going to happen with the gas distributor, about the terrible corruption that is going on in the award of contracts and the preferential treatment of family and friends, then you can't have a conversation and identify the problems and therefore try to find solutions. You cannot pretend that all is well in the Garden of Eden. All is not well. Corruption is terrible. Exclusion is terrible. There is seething resentment at the bottom. There is an increasing disparity in wealth. And if we don't recognize and acknowledge that these things are part of the failure of the systems and policies of the existing government, and part and parcel of the failures of the previous government, if we don't acknowledge that, how can we fix it? Thank you, Vish.
Joel?
When I think all of us here, myself, Liberty, GHK, are holders, or we have held in the case of GHK, public offices. I'm a constitutional officer of the PPC as a commissioner, and I'm a public commentator. When you come into this sphere, and when you're a public official, the fact is that you are subject to public scrutiny. Public scrutiny cannot be equated to smear campaign and personal attacks. And I attempted to distinguish what is a personal attack versus holding an ex-public officer accountable. And every citizen has a right to do so. Every citizen has a right to hold me accountable and ask me hard questions. And I have a right to give answers. I did not say GHK is a sexist or a woman, whatever. I did not call him names. I did not ascribe. I have written about his record, which is an official audit report. And he's obligated to answer that. He's obligated to answer that. And unlike the view that, oh, there is this smear campaign, let me take this opportunity to say that using GHK's defense, oh, the cabinet approved this, and I did, the board approved this, and this was not, it didn't break any law. Now, GHK had the opportunity. What I did not make up those things. I put, if you read the original article, this is what the audit report said, this is the year, and then my comments, I distinguish what is my comment based on what the audit report says. GHK now had the opportunity to respond to say, this here, where the audit report says, they're not sure if they follow the procurement law. There is no evidence that the license, the award of gold license was in compliance with the Gold Board Act. He talked about EML. We have an EML act of this. We have an EML legislation in this country. GHK could have come and say, and I respect he's an educated person, and he could have come and say, section so and so of this act says this, and this is what he did in compliance with this act. He could have come and academically, systematically dispute what I said, dispute the audit report rather. He is getting the audit report of gutter, and he is saying that Dr. Bharat Jagdeo, the vice president, orchestrated this. I don't work with the vice president. I am not an employee of the government. I work from home. I don't take instructions from nobody. Nobody instructs me to do anything. And I'm going to be very transparent with you. And importantly, Timothy is transparent because we know he's a politician. That is a fact. Timothy is not hiding behind any hidden agenda. There's a reason what I'm doing today, GHK, I've been doing since 2017. I saw somebody posted a comment, where was my voice in the PNC days? Well, I was one of the most critical analysts, young analysts, since 2017 when I finished my first master's degree, started writing a column, and I was in debates. I took on people like Raw Lucas, Winston Jordan. So I fighted with the PNC since the PNC was in power. Right? Now, I don't have a hidden agenda, and I don't need favors from anybody. and I'm not a member of any political party. Let me be very transparent with you. I do what I do because of what I believe. I have studied this country's history, politically, socially, economically. In 2015 to 2020, before the elections, and I've written this. You could go on the internet and find the articles that I've written, a few political economy articles about what I felt about what's going to happen in 2020. I wrote, and I've said it publicly, that there is this feeling that the opposition would rig the election and they would do whatever it takes to stay in power. I wrote several pieces, and I do what I do because I took a conscious decision to stay in this country. My plan was to migrate from this country, and I took a conscious decision. It's important for me to say this because I got to make an important point to the audience and to those here. I took a conscious decision to stay because I believe, based on the numbers, based on the performance, there are challenges, as is the case for everything, that I'm a pro-government person, and if this government is in power, then the economy is going to flourish, we're going to have prosperity, and anybody would do well in any field as a professional. And I took a conscious decision to stay. And the reason I do what I do on my own accord is to help defend the government, because there is an army of people and that army has vastly outnumbered the people who are defending government. You know who are the people defending government? Myself and probably two other people and the vice president. The people against the government, you have Anup, but I have respect. Let me say it. I have respect for Timothy. You have the Glenn Lal, you have the OGGN, you have GHK Lal, you have a long list of them, you have the whole opposition, you have a long list. I compile a list of comparison. There's a very few of us defend the government. And we have a right to defend the government policy. And that is what I do, to help the government. And that is my trans. I don't have a hidden agenda. And this is why it is important. Why I did what I did, not because the vice president told me to go and pick this up. I don't even have contact with it. I don't even have access to the vice president. I did it because if you are a public commentator, and if you held a public office, and I see that you're distorting information and you're writing poetry, then you need to defend your record. And that is what I did.
Okay, I think that's fair enough. I think you have laid out your position that you're pro-government.
Could I make a closing comment, please?
And I will allow you to make the closing comment, and then we'll go watch cricket.
Okay. Every point that was raised in the original letter, I do not read the Chronicle. I answered those. And that stands for itself, and it speaks for itself as to what were the circumstances and the context of the goal board in every one of those areas that were raised. That's one. Secondly, I have heard, and really I shouldn't talk about propaganda machinery and money and numbers. I'll leave that one alone. That's beneath me. That I'm not going to go as the who's got a list and whatever. What I'd like to say is that as public figures, we have, as a public commentator, whether, for or against or whatever, we have a duty to be towards honesty and to be a lack of malice and manipulation of information, and that's our duty. One thing I will say on a personal note, at age 50, I retired. At the peak of my career on Wall Street, I retired, and I come back here, and it may surprise Mr. Bagwandin, as a supporter or a defender of the government, as he calls himself. My first stop in 2007, and I didn't stay here long because personal circumstances intervened, and I had to go back for you. My first stop, and it was under a PPP government, was to say, I have come to give back. That is news to a lot of people. And I actually went to a government school and offered my services free, and it was accepted. And then I could not. I was told by the chairman of the board, don't go because a senior officer there has a problem and it is not the best time. So I ended up at a private school. During my time at a private school, I was part of the board of governors of that same school. And a man from the Ministry of Education under the PPP government asked me to give a helping hand monitoring some stuff at another government school. And I said, yes, I'll do it. So this thing that I am anti-PPP or anti-this or that, the record is there. Yes, I voted, said I publicly, maybe that was a mistake, twice I'll vote for Granger, I did. And I was one of the first to say, you've lost the damn elections, get out of here, right? Concede graciously. And I lost my head for that. Then the last thing I want to say is that I'm done with voting. But that's a bad decision, perhaps. It's not a democratic decision. But the fact is, if we're gonna have conversations, we're gonna have exchanges, it must be based on honesty. It must be based on honesty. We have a responsibility towards that. And I think that there was a lot of that lacking. And I think that I heard some of that lacking here tonight. And I regret that. And I'm going to have to talk to the people at this program to determine whether I'm going to be a participant in this program again, right? So that, and again, gentlemen, all three of you, thank you for the courtesies extended. Thank you for agreeing to share with me. And thank you for allowing me to share with you.
I hope this will not be your last appearance. I hope we'll see you again and again. And gentlemen, I thank you all for coming tonight. I wish you a good night. I wish Guyana well in the cricket tonight. And I'll let you all go. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us tonight and watching this very, very interesting debate conversation on the subject of whether we should have a new form of government or governance. Thank you and good night all.
Good night.
Beautiful Guyana with wonderful people all over this country. She is a beautiful
Guyana will become the next Dubai, and we, the citizens of Guyana, are super excited to benefit from our homeland the same way the citizens of Dubai benefit from theirs.
This is what life is like for citizens from the Emirate of Dubai.
Guyana will become the next Dubai.
with wonderful people all over this country. She is a beauty, beautiful Guyana.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Globespan 24/7, owned and operated by Mr. Nohar Singh. Joining us tonight is, as usual, Mr. Devin Bissoon, the technical operator of Globespan 24/7. This is Wednesday's edition, September 13th, sorry. We are discussing tonight